Is it?
Hello, we're there.
3 people. Hello.
Hello, everyone. And there'll be more looking that aren't logged in. So anyway, we're live.
Okay, great.
Welcome to everyone who's joining us live. Thanks so much for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon, a bit of a chilly afternoon in Sydney. We've had some rain, which is fantastic. We've needed it. And I want to welcome, with great pleasure, Dan Ilic. Welcome to you, Dan.
Hello, nice to be with you and the rest of you who have taken your afternoon lunch break late. Thanks.
Really appreciated those that are joining us live and that are logged in, and please ask us some questions live. To those that aren't logged in and are joining us live, hello, welcome. We're just going to have a chat about a few things, and I thought it would be interesting to speak with Dan about, well, first of all, to hear about what you do, but also to talk about the importance of satire and humour in our really wild political landscape. We were just kind of saying then that it's just off air quickly. It's not dull at the moment by any means, and it almost, in some ways, the comedy writes itself, to say the least. So I want to get a really good feel of where humour and satire really fits in and the role that it plays. But Dan, first of all, perhaps we should come to you and tell us a little bit about yourself. You call yourself on Twitter an investigative humourist, which is a really interesting title. So tell us about that. What does an investigative humourist do?
Well, because probably for the last 10 years of my career, I've done a little bit of journalism and a little bit of comedy, and so this is a title that kind of combines both of those things together. So I find that investigative humorist kind of sums it up in as least complex way as possible. And that way I don't have to kind of explain to people what it is that I do. Usually when I say investigative humorist, they kind of understand and we can move on with our lives.
Very good. And some of the work that you do indeed with a show that I saw a couple of weeks ago in Sydney with Rational Fear. Tell us about that. It seems that you concentrate at various times on sort of topical issues. So the one that I saw was about journalistic freedom, where there were people like Alice Workman was on the stage. She's a little bit controversial within the Twitter community. We won't go down that path. Ray Martin was on the stage. Ben Fordham was on the stage. He's very controversial at the moment in the Twitter community. Kate McClymont, who of course is someone that most of us admire, particularly for her work in New South Wales. So tell us about the work that you do with Rational Fear.
Well, A Rational Fear is my stage show and podcast. You can listen to it. Go to irrationalfear.com and download it. We've been going for a few years now. I put it on hold when I moved to America because I just didn't have the contacts or I needed to kind of figure out how I was going to work in America before I could do it. So I never really brought it back for an American audience, which is sad. You know, if ever I moved back to America, I'd start it up in America again for sure. Now I know so many more comedians and journalists there. And it's a shit-stirring platform to talk about real issues, and it's a show that I like to say it's kind of like Q&A on crack. It's fast, it's funny. We get good brains to talk about big serious issues, but hopefully in a funny and interesting way. So we can kind of help people understand some of the minutiae behind some of the larger things that are going on. So many people don't have a lot of time to kind of invest in understand the news, like Twitter junkies like you and me, Denise, and the 3 people that have joined us here on this Crowdcast platform. But it's one of those things that I love, and I think I've got a little bit of a skill in able to take really complex, dense ideas and boil them down into bite-sized funnies, and that's kind of what I try and do with A Rational Fear. So it's a podcast that's been going since 2012. We started off at the FBI Social in King's Cross. We had a broadcast on FBI, and then from FBI we had a broadcast on Radio National, and then we sold out the Opera House a few times. And then in 2014 we raised 200 grand and made a whole bunch of digital content online, and that was really successful. And I got to hire a whole bunch of really funny people to sit in the room, make jokes all the time. That was great. And then I went overseas for 4 years, and now that I've been back a year, I decided to start it up again. I thought I'd really make a real commitment to take Irrational Fear to the next level, to double down on it, to kind of grow that audience, and then tour around Australia. So we've now got over 1,000 listeners, which is pretty great, and we have more people coming to the shows than listeners probably. Last 2 weeks ago for our Press Freedom show, we had 250 people sold out the Giant Dwarf. Our Adelaide Fringe Festival shows sold out, and our climate change show in Brisbane, which was our biggest show to date, had about 500 people crammed in the Brisbane Powerhouse, and that sold out. That was during Climate Week when the climate reality training stuff was happening. And the great thing about that show is if you go back and listen to it, there is a great moment when you kind of pick up on the underlying joke that's happening, because we got told 10 minutes before our climate change show that we weren't allowed to use the word Adani. and so everyone, all the comedians are making Adani jokes, but you can't. You need the context of that to understand what's happening there, why people aren't actually saying the word Adani. So that was a really fun show, and the audience was on board straight away. We came out and I said, "Oh, good day, everyone. We just got told 10 minutes ago that we're not allowed to say a word. If anyone can guess what it is," and before I could finish that sentence, I had 500 people yell out, "Adani!" So that was really amazing. So we're kind of figuring out a way to make Irrational Fear bigger and have it self-sustaining. It's really hard to do. It's really financially difficult to put on. And I put weeks of work into it and kind of don't get much in return for it. But when we do those big shows like Adelaide and Brisbane, they're often paid for by other people. So that's when we kind of get paid, and I can pay contributors properly and things like that. So for me, that's exciting that I can build something that people want to buy and have in their region. So if that's going to be the case moving forward, I can see that will be a really fun thing. Ideally, in a wonderful utopian world, it would be on Channel 10 at 9:30 at night. It would be on a commercial network or even the ABC. But the ABC don't like jokes, so probably not the ABC.
No, they certainly don't like, well, we know what happened with Tonightly.
I was aware of what happened, yeah.
Yes, you were kind of involved in that. Out of interest, why weren't you allowed to use the word Adani? Was it Adani that told you that?
Oh, well, the sponsor for Climate Week was the Queensland government.
Okay, got it. Well, and you know what? The audience that are watching this video cast, Dan, will know exactly what you mean by that, sadly.
Yep.
Greatly to our regret. What I really liked about the show, and you're right, the one that I was at the Giant Dwarf, it was really busy, but there was obviously also, you're right, there was a lot going on in the background. You had a producer there, you had the live podcast going, you had sort of an actor come onto the stage. You could see that there was clearly a lot that went into it. And I know that when you and I have been trying to do this for a couple of weeks, you were like, I can't, I'm really busy writing scripts and so on. So, yeah, it does seem like a really sort of long process. And isn't that sort of the comedy? It looks easy, but there's an awful lot of preparation that goes into it.
Oh, yeah, mainly for those shows, it's like there's so much, because I produce it, I make the show. So it's like I book it, produce it, program it, sell it, promote it, call up journalists trying to get people to write about it. It's like it takes up so much time. It would be nice to get to the point where I can pay a producer to produce it, promote it, sell it, and I just get to sit there and write jokes and host the show. Yeah. So I'm also, I mean, I've gotten really good at making those shows. My brain's kind of gotten around how to make those shows as least intensive as possible. So I take 2 days to write it and make sure those 2 days are kind of sectioned off so I can just concentrate on that, and I fill my life around that other stuff. In the meantime, I'm writing scripts and stuff like that for corporate clients and an 8-part audio drama, which I can tell you more about later. But yeah, so there's lots of other kind of things I'm trying to fit in between doing Irrational Fear. And I love doing Irrational Fear. And once we can try and find the day and the month to put that on, that's the kind of the whole month revolves around that and getting Irrational Fear booked and up to scratch and really good, so the audience can enjoy it. And if they enjoy it in the room, hopefully they'll enjoy it on the podcast as well.
On the podcast too, and maybe live streaming in a video format too, Dan, is down the track as we're doing now.
Yeah, maybe. Hopefully, I don't mind doing it as a podcast because then I can edit out anything that's defamatory.
Fair enough. I don't recall hearing anything too defamatory on the show that I was at. You mentioned, and you're right, as I said, it was quite packed the night that I was there in Sydney, and the one that you just mentioned that was going on in Brisbane on the Climate Change Week was really packed. So there does seem to be an audience for this kind of political satire.
Yeah, and we're coming to Canberra in 2 weeks. So if you're in Canberra, come along to the Street Theatre September 7th.
And which one are you doing? What's the theme for Canberra?
That will be just one of our regular shows. So I haven't got a theme around that one yet, but I'm sure as the news gets closer, as the time gets closer, there'll be something in the news to hang the whole show off. But we don't theme every show. In fact, we've only really themed out of the 60 shows we've done, we've only really themed 2 shows: the Climate Change Show and the Press Freedom Show. So we'll see how we go.
And as Helen has just commented to us, you'll see that question on the side, we need satire more than ever. Yeah. And that gives me the nicest segue, Helen, thank you so much, to talk a little bit about satire and the importance, smiley from you, Helen, thank you, and the importance of satire in these completely crazy political times we find ourselves in, to say the least. What has been the role of political satire and humour? And I suppose the cartoonists, we would put them under the same umbrella through the ages, and the importance of that in, again, these crazy times where I kind of think in sometimes if you don't laugh, then you cry.
That is absolutely correct. That is absolutely correct. I did a sketch at the beginning of the year on Manus Island. I made a Where Bloody Hell Are You parody with some refugees on Manus Island. And as I was being deported from Port Moresby, the immigration official said, so what were you doing on Manus Island? I said, I was making comedy with some refugees on Manus Island. And he said, well, that doesn't sound very funny. It doesn't sound like a funny subject to make fun of. And I said, no, it's not. I said, I make jokes about the saddest things. And he actually wrote it down, makes jokes about the saddest things on the report. And I managed, as he left the room quickly, I managed to take a photo of the report. And I've got that picture somewhere. It's on my official P&G do not allow to enter profile. But as I was being deported from Papua New Guinea, the border guard who stamped my passport looked at my profile, looked at the notes as to why I was being deported, and he said, "Oh, you're a comedian." I said, "Yeah." "Are you on YouTube?" I said, "Yeah." "I'll have to follow you." I'm like, "Yeah, please do." And he said, "I'm really sorry. Our government doesn't understand jokes," and stamps my passport and lets me go. So I think it is exactly how you articulated it. Sometimes it's a cathartic release to kind of ease the tension about how we're feeling about something in the news. And hopefully with what I do is I can, in a similar way, good journalism, I couldn't operate without good journalism. So what I do is I take good journalism and put jokes in it and make it simpler and dumber and more digestible for some folks to understand, or more entertaining for me as well. So it's one of those things where I just kind of break down an issue and put jokes in it, and I think that's kind of a nice fun way to kind of deal with some of the tougher subjects out there. So I used to think probably 5 years ago that good satirical content could change people's minds. I don't think that anymore. I used to think that a good campaign and a good bit of content can be shared and people can get a call to action to that, raise money, campaign, and get some change in the world. But I feel like the social internet over the last 10 years has really degraded that impact of being able to do that. I feel like we all now operate in such strict silos and very narrow silos that we don't kind of see other points of view anymore. So some folks will say it's preaching to the choir, and your description of the lineup for our Press Freedom Show is interesting because our lineup for that Press Freedom Show was a very broad lineup. You know, we had old people, young people, and people from right across the political spectrum, and that was intentional. That was intentional to do, and in fact, the event itself was supported by Sleeping Giants and Get Up, and Get Up in particular probably brought about a third of that audience to the show, and there weren't any ABC people on that stage or ABC journalists on that stage because it was my choice to protect them from potential fallout from a Jared Henderson article in the Australian that ABC people were doing a stage show with that Get Up supported, but instead you've got Alice Workman and Ben Fordham doing a stage show that Get Up supported. So so it was purely to neutralise. So that audience would have loved to have seen Lee Sales or someone like that on. It was purely to neutralise that attack from the right. So it's one of those things where I'm aiming for a broad audience, but I want to talk about issues in a very fair way and a very anti-authoritarian way, and yeah. So kind of really, that's kind of how I see Irrational Fear.
I'm interested in what you just said about you don't think that comedy can change minds. I mean, that's something that we in the auspol Twitter community, we talk about quite a lot. We say, look, we know that we're a bubble. Everyone who's accusing us as being a bubble, it's like, we know. Thank you, we know. And, now and then we say, look, how do we break through that bubble and share our knowledge and share our passion for politics and just help people see perhaps a different view in these quite divisive times. I think about someone like the Juice Media as an example, and, they just do things so well, but they, of course, look at a different topic. And quite often I find that, look, there's more truth in that 2 or 3 minutes of their honest government advertising than quite often you'll see about a topic in the serious news.
Yeah.
I mean, the Timor-Leste video, of course, after Four Corners last night, I had another look at that. And it's like, my God, that's been around for months now. We've all known about it.
Yeah.
Of course, the revelations on Four Corners last night would have reached a new audience. I'm interested in, why is it that satire seems to be able to get to the truth of a matter that sometimes our mainstream media doesn't seem to be able to?
I think our mainstream media does get to the truth of the matter. I feel like satire can do it quicker, with more precision, only because there's things that comedians can do that journalists can't, and namely having a point of view. So journalists aren't allowed to have a point of view in many newsrooms, unless you work for the Australian, probably. But it's one of those things where comedians are allowed to have a point of view. Comedians lean into a subject and build it up an argument for an idea one way or the other. And I think and you have to do it with comedy. You have to do it with the least amount of work for a joke to work. You have to do it with the least amount of words and ideas for the joke to work. And you have to operate on one idea at one time. So particularly around big complex stories, which often are multifaceted, it's a little harder to tell that story. But if you can narrow down one concept within that idea and just attack that over and over again, then you will be able to get an idea. You get your idea through clearer and cleaner and faster than traditional journalism. So, but in order to do that, as comedians or satirists, you need strong traditional journalism in order to do that. Like, I just literally ride the coattails of journalists who do all the hard work, and then I take their hard work and boil it down into a 30-second video or a 1-minute video. So that's kind of. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I'm interested. I mean, you're right. Sometimes I look at, Mad as Hell as an example as well.
Yes.
And you think, my goodness, do defamation laws apply to comedians in the same way that they apply to journalists?
Absolutely.
Because sometimes it feels like that's very brave, knowing that, you have to be a bit tiptoey sometimes.
Yeah, particularly the ABC. It's one of those things where every script that I passed my hands at Tonightly went up to legal and editorial policy, and every line that came out of Tom Ballard's mouth went through a legal and ed pol person, and we were told
every word.
Yeah, every word. Yeah, pretty much. And once you had those two ticks, then you could proceed with making the sketch or proceed to the next stage. So it often would require intense negotiation with lawyers regarding risk on certain things. Like they would say, well, the risk on this is very high. I would say not do it. Or the risk on this is negligible. You could do it, but there is a risk, and everything's a risk. But it's yeah, that's all they do is kind of manage risk. But particularly on Mad as Hell, you could rest assured that everything would have been going through lawyers for anything that comes out of Sean's mouth. And the great place where Sean sits in the pantheon of Australian comedy is that because his stuff's a little bit more absurd and uses characters to kind of accentuate points, he's never really dealing with the individual person or the individual department. And so you're able to do things with a character being an avatar for somebody else. And with absurdity, you can kind of go off on a tangent and build a metaphor and build an allegory around an idea that's not exactly the issue you're talking about. So you're allowed to do that. Yeah. And because it's not defaming anyone, you can't defame someone that doesn't exist.
That is really interesting. And again, that's why satire is no doubt so important. I think that's interesting. Not only have you got legal looking at you, but from what you've said, you've also got some of our media looking at you. So you've kind of got, these two forces that you're, juggling and thinking about when you're writing.
Yeah. You got to worry a lot about I try not to let my team, when I was running Tonight, let my team be too phased about what jokes they should self-censor themselves on. I would just send it up to legal and the editorial policy and let them be the arbiters of that. And I generally, if it was funny, I would back it. If it was funny and true, I would back it. And then any other fights we had to have upstairs with editorial policy or legal, we would do that on a case-by-case basis. And the great thing about when you're working in a huge organisation like the ABC, there are absolutely professional and generous with their support, and they will do their best to try and help you figure out ways to get around policy and to adhere to the law. And they're very good. Like that's a wonderful thing about working for the ABC in that regard. You do have this giant machine you can rely on to help. And
I mean, it almost sounds like they're helping you make the point that you want to make without getting yourself in any trouble.
Exactly, and they are all for that. And the teams that we worked with upstairs at the ABC were just wonderful. So there's room to do great work within the boundaries of what is applicable to editorial policy and applicable to legal risk.
I think too in this day and age where sadly we're increasingly hearing the word like authoritarianism, even the word fascism is creeping into sort of what's going on here. Again, coming back to last night's Four Corners where we heard things like police state, the secret state. It's some of it's getting into quite scary territory, and again, those of us that are very politically informed are really concerned about some of the things that we're seeing. I've sort of thought when they start coming after people like you, Dan, that's when we should really be starting to worry. It seems to me that satire, political cartoonists, and political humourists, or investigative humourists, as you call yourself, don't really exist in authoritarian states. So I'm very pleased to know that you're still around, but how much longer can we expect to have you around, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know either, but when that happens, I'll just move to the US. That'll be fine. They've got much better freedom of speech laws in the US, so I could go there and work for someone.
I think it's Kim actually on the Independents account is asking us what's the line between clear satire or humour versus our defamation laws, and has it ever been tested in court? That's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, it has been tested in court, and you will remember the Chaser lost a very fundamental court case where they made up a Photoshop picture of Chris Kenny fucking a dog, and Chris Kenny took them to court for defamation because he thought that 2 seconds worth of graphics defamed him. And though it was a joke, and though it's very clear to a joke, and it's very clear to an audience that a joke, but calling Chris Kenny a dog fucker and putting a picture of Chris Kenny fucking a dog up became a very costly mistake for the ABC. But the great thing is that Chris Kenny, when he went to court, had to prove to the court that because he was defamed by that joke, he had to prove to the court that some people may actually think that he is possible of fucking a dog. So I mean, at least that's great. I can't even remember what the sketch was about, but it was something to do with Sky News, I think. But it's one of those things where the joke, it was an all right joke, but it might not have been on topic, or might not have been more on target for what they wanted to say. It was more of a throwaway line than anything. And if they probably had their time again, they'd probably choose a different joke.
Clearly, it's interesting, isn't it, that he's never lived that down. It's mentioned on Twitter all the time. So was it slightly that Streisand effect that we talk about all the time? He brought more attention to it than that 2 seconds that it was on the air.
I think so, and I also think he's probably he's a saying you get to say a lot when you're a comedian. In my honest opinion, he's probably just a nasty bloke who just wanted to fuck the ABC. So, and he just took the opportunity to do that and get himself some money. And it's very stressful to take any organisation like that to court, but he did it and won. And that's good on him.
And as I said, it's certainly given some people on Twitter reams of giggles, I suppose, because I see it being brought up all the time.
Yeah, well, at least everybody knows that Chris Kenny did not fuck a dog, or something to do with Chris Kenny and fucking dogs. I can't remember if he did it or not. Do you know? Who knows? I can't remember.
I really try not to think about that person very often for my mental health.
Okay.
Of course, we're also seeing in the US, we're seeing a lot of satirists and humour, and even cartoonists, satirists more than anything, but the late night hosts are really doing a great job in commentating on what's going on in the US. Who are some of the favourites? I mean, you can name Australian ones, of course, and I really like the Juice Media. I think they do a terrific job, partly because they also highlight a really good topic that you actually learn a bit about. I notice also, just as an aside, that the Juice Media, there's a bit of sweary stuff going on in the Juice Media. They've now done a PC version because a lot of parents and teachers were asking for their content, which I think is a really good testament to again, the facts that they're showing, in a really interesting way to learn about fairly complex issues. But who are some of your favourite, cartoonists, satirists, and so on here and overseas? Who are some that you can point us to?
Well, there's so many that we already know as well, like Colbert is just brilliant, and his show, what he's managed to do with his CBS show is really fantastic. Jon Stewart's Daily Show is very good. I think Trevor Noah is doing a pretty good job on Daily Show. I think Jenna Friedman is someone who has been trying. She's a Daily Show alumni. She's got a show on Adult Swim, and it's blisteringly funny and savage, and it's really, really good. She's doing great. Samantha B's doing great. And then at home, in Germany, there's Jan Bollman. He kind of does like a This Week Tonight style of show, like a weekly kind of show. I think
does the German humour translate for us? I mean,
yes.
when I'm in Germany,
it's really good.
It's a different kind of humour.
I mean, that's what the people say. I don't think so. I think they're really funny. I think Jan Bowman's very funny. I think there's a couple of the Israeli show at the moment. There's an Israeli show at the moment that's set inside a prison, and it's really funny. I can't remember, but it's this Israeli show that's excellent. The Israelis have a very similar sense of humour to Australians,
really?
And yeah, they're very dark and very political and very biting. And if you ever get to see The Jews Are Coming, which is a sketch show by this Israeli group, that's really savage. They really savage BB and the write very hard on their show. It's really great. And locally, I think Sean does a great job, and Charlie does a great job. And in podcast land, you've got The Bugle, which comes out of the UK, and Nish Kumar and Alice Fraser are often on that. And when those three are together on The Bugle, it is just a delicious, hilarious 40 minutes of listening. Nish Kumar in the UK hosts the MASH Report, and he's been there.
Sorry, we are completely live, and I am home.
He and Tiff Stevenson do a great job there too. So everyone's kind of in the trenches, doing good work. And then there's a whole gamut of people online. There's one of my favorite people online is a guy called Randy Rainbow, and Randy Rainbow takes cable TV clips, inserts himself as the interviewer, and then sings songs to Trump or whoever is on these cable TV clips.
Oh, I've seen him. He's really good. That's really funny.
Really good. Yeah, he's really good. There's loads. There's people. Some folks really hate a guy called Friendly Jordies. I don't think he's too bad. I think Friendly Jordies does a really interesting job of highlighting important news stories to a whole generation of people who might not pay attention otherwise. And I feel like he's got his moments where he's very, very funny and very, very scathing.
I'm going tomorrow night. Are you going tomorrow night?
Oh, is it a live show he's putting on?
Yeah, I'm going to the live show tomorrow night.
No, I don't think I'm going to get along to Sally Rugg's book launch tomorrow night, so I'll be listening to Friendly Geordie's show. But I'm sure it'll be good. And Jordan is a really interesting character and complex dude, and I think he's doing interesting work. So there's something like Kate, the catering girls. Oh my God, Kate McCartney and Kate McLennan. Their projects are always amazing. And Gorry makes great work.
They're really good, aren't they? I really like that. I'm interested. I mean, I bought Friendly Geordie's tickets just because I was hearing a lot of buzz about him, basically, and just thought I want to go and have a look and hear what he's got to say. And I think the show tomorrow night is more or less telling the truth about John Howard.
Right, great.
At last, fantastic. Someone's telling the truth about John Howard. I really need to do that.
Well, there you go. And it's never too late.
Well, he's still, he's still interviewed and he still seems to be everywhere. So let's, it's about time we heard some home truths about some of the things that he did. That is a really nice list. And again, these are the people that I think in these kind of really depressing political times can really help, A, to bring a truth to a situation, but B, maybe reach different audiences as Friendly Geordies is, but also, again, coming back to the if you don't laugh, then you cry.
Totally, yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
So tell us, Dan, I notice on Twitter that you've done a little clip that is asking people or tourists particularly what Canberra is. Is that a bit of a hint about what your next show is going to be about?
Well, we're doing a Rational Fear in Canberra, so I just wanted to make a bit of Canberra bespoke content to play to them, and it's very funny. I interviewed a whole bunch of tourists on Bondi Beach, what they think, asking them what is Canberra, and the responses were phenomenal. And mind you, I had to stand there for an hour finding people who didn't know what Canberra was, but there were plenty of people who were mainly Europeans and people from Asia who definitely knew what Canberra was. But it seems that a lot of Americans just didn't know what Canberra was.
That fits the stereotype, doesn't it?
In the video I played, there's a great bit where the young guy from Tennessee was like, "It's a beach." Yeah, it is a beach. Very confident in his face. And then when someone yells at him what Canberra is, he's like, "Oh yeah, it's a capital. Yeah, I knew it was a place." I'm like, if you knew it was a place, you would have said it was a place. You had no idea. So anyway, it just shows you what kind of confidence you can have if you're a young white guy.
Exactly. And, those vox pops, again, I think are so effective. It's interesting that you say you had to stand there for an hour. That's probably the secret to some of the vox pops we hear when we see them on the news as well. they know the answer or the narrative they want to create.
Oh no, I don't think so. Look, I've done that job as a journalist as well, and you just want to get 4 or 5 people and leave. And so, but as a comedian, you've got to hang around and wait for the funniest response, because otherwise you'll go home with a dud package. So yeah, I think in a general news sense, I think they'll take whoever they've got and then get back to the station, because they usually got to turn that around for the afternoon.
So Irrational Fear in Canberra. Anything else on your forward agenda? Aside from your tweets, you're a good tweeter, which we always appreciate as well.
Just a great tweeter. Sign up to the podcast. Go to irrationalfear.com and become a member of the pod family, and you'll get that Canberra show in your inbox soon after we do the show. But if you're in Canberra, do come along. It's going to be fun. We've got Lewis Hobart from Triple J, Mike Bowers from The Guardian and Insiders, Shalada Medora, who's also used to be from The Guardian, now at Triple J Hack, and myself, and Mark Humphreys as well from 7:30. And it's great because we all know each other. So
comedy. The one person who I also really like, just to mention him, is Sammy J.
Oh, sorry. Mark Humphreys and Sammy J are doing some of the best work at the moment ever. They're just like killing it. And they make so much great stuff. And Sammy J's writers, shout out to Chris McDonald and James Pendar. They do good work with Sammy J. And behind the scenes with Mark Humphries is a guy called Evan Williams, who is just a brainiac and a gigantic encyclopedia on news and current affairs in Australia since the time he was born. He's only about 30, and so he's less. He's like 27 or something. So he knows so much, and so these guys make incredible work. And I just want to acknowledge that as well.
I want to come to a party with all of you guys. I mean, that's my kind of place where I can have those kind of conversations.
Irrational Fear, September 7 at the Street Theatre in Canberra, Denise. You will all be there.
I should come down to Canberra, actually. Tell me also, on your Twitter byline, it says you're on the board of FBI Radio.
Yeah, FBI is one of the longest running community radio stations in Sydney, and we just turned 16 years old. We reach 500,000 people every survey period. We are one of probably the largest community radio stations in Sydney, and it's we have a huge audience and ground for young media people, but also a supporter and a platform for Sydney's music, arts and culture. And it is just a killer little radio station that I got my start in when it first started. I did the first ever mid-dawn shift on FBI radio back in the day, 2003. And I'm on the board these days, making sure it's still ticking over. And it's great. If you do love Sydney music, arts and culture, go listen to their podcasts and subscribe to the station. Give them a little bit of money.
FBI, yes, I think that we should explore a little bit more in the community radio stations.
That's where Irrational Fear got its start at FBI Radio. They broadcast it first, and they broadcast it live from the FBI social. So I'm totally indebted to them for giving us a nudge in the early days.
Very good, very good. I will actually check out FBI Radio a bit more. Kim is giving me a time check. Kim is always like, we've got to stick to the time. We've got to stick to the time. But I just get chatting, so I like to talk. Helen is asking us about political musicals like Keating the Musical. Is there still a place for those?
Oh, absolutely, there's still a place. I wrote a musical 10 years ago called Beaconsfield, a musical in A-flat minor, and it was all about the media exploitation of the Beaconsfield mine disaster. And it was huge. It got 5 stars in The Age and sold out the Melbourne Comedy Festival. It was epic. And right now, I know at Edinburgh Fringe, one of the big shows right now is Brexit the musical. So there's a whole musical all about Brexit. If there's something popular or bigger or more or broad enough, someone will write a musical about it. I know there's a Leighton Hewitt the musical. I don't think that was particularly political, but I know that exists as well. So press free to the musical, Helen. Yeah, maybe press free to the musical. It would have to be in the form of a musical so it doesn't get shut down. Probably.
I mean, it just made me think that these difficult political times are, it's a good time for comedians at the moment. I'm personally hoping that things settle down a little bit, Dan, so perhaps, you can find your inspiration through some other things.
Well, in 2016, I went to America and I covered the election for Fusion Network over there, and I was like their kind of EP of satire, running a very small team of 2. And I didn't really know what was going on. And then this guy got into power, And it made life incredibly difficult for my job because everything he would do, he would be 10 times as funny. So I don't mind it when politicians are boring, because when politicians are boring, there's something there that you need to pay attention to. And that's kind of where I feel satire comes into its own. I don't think satire gets any easier when politics is boring, because that's the time you've got to pay most attention.
Yep, well said. Any final comments you'd like to make for us before we say farewell?
Go to irrationalfear.com and give me your email address, and I'll send you the podcast every month.
Yeah, well, please do. And, always send things to me. I'm always happy to promote you, Dan.
Thank you.
But want to say thanks to everyone actually for me, on Friday, I'm doing a live podcast with Marie, who's one of our auspol Twitter community members, and she's actually a part of the Adani and Galilee blockade. So we're going to be hearing from someone right on the, and I'm going to be able to say that word, Dan. I'm going to say it a lot.
Adani.
Adani. We're going to hear from someone right on the spot. So I think there's a court case today where they're trying to shut down the protests. I haven't actually heard of the outcome of that, but we really want to hear it from their point of view, what's actually happening. So please, I'll tweet out some times for that on Friday. In the meantime, I'll say again, thanks to everyone who's listened to us live. Dan, come back and join us.
Maybe I will. And I want to say thank you to everyone who follows the auspol hashtag. It's something I tag a lot of my stuff with, and I know many of you retweet, and so thank you very much for all the retweets and the likes. You might not think that's a big deal, but when I see that 7 people have liked something or 6 people have retweeted it, that's a huge deal to me. So thank you so much.
That is really nice of you to say. Now I'm going to turn this off. You and I are just going to disappear, and we're not going to see each other again. Sadly, we won't go back into the green room.
Okay, well, it was nice to be with you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Good luck with the Canberra show. And again, thanks everyone for joining us live. The replay will be available in all good places. This video chat is available.
Great.
Let me end broadcast. See you, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Dan.